looks like. Today on Austin Faith Dialogue, we'll look at the state of religious art world and how an upcoming local seminar is bringing some of the best in religious art to the Austin community.
Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs series at the crossroads of religion and life. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues in the area in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Join us now for this week's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm your host, Pastor Carl Gronberg of Gethsemane Lutheran Church. When you and I think about religious art, we probably think of works from the Renaissance, the classic paintings or sculptures that we might see in a museum. However, religious art is much more. It is still quite an active pursuit for artists. So religious art is alive and well, especially here in Austin. Next weekend, on the campus of Concordia Lutheran College, a group of people from our community called Austin Christian Fellowship of Artists will be holding a conference called The Creative Spirit. The conference will be for 2 days, and the program will bring together a number of religious artists who will not only show off their work, but try to reach out to the faith community for the involvement of the faith community in today's artistic endeavors. Joining us today, not only to discuss the state of religious art, but also topics to be covered at the upcoming Creative Spirits Conference, are two very qualified persons of our Austin community. First, John Bybee is the president of the Austin Christian Artists Fellowship. His group is sponsoring Creative Spirit. And we're also joined by Jim Janknet, a local artist who will be participating in next weekend's program. I want to thank you both for being with us today on Austin Faith Dialogue. Jim, John, welcome to our program. We want to talk a little bit about the state of religious art in the 1990s. Jim, you're an artist. How about talking to us about what you see and understand the state of religious art to be in the 1990s?
Well, we've invited, I think, 15 artists to be in this exhibition that's going to be concurrent with this seminar. And all of them are Christians, and they're also artists. And their work is quite varied. So when you talk about religious art, it's quite a varied thing we're talking about. I think myself, and speaking for most of these people, I would guess that predominantly our work comes out of our life as Christians, so that sometimes the subject matter may be very overtly Christian, other times it may be very subtle and just woven into the context of the work. So the paintings you saw at the beginning of this program of mine were very overtly Christian, with some obvious Christian themes and stories and narratives going on.
Jim, what do you think is the response of our culture, of our time, of our generation towards religious art? As we said at the top of the program, when we think about religious art, we probably think back to the Middle Ages and to the Renaissance and to the museums and places of Europe. But that's not the only religious art. There's a faithful religious art that's going on today, isn't that correct? And how receptive is our culture to that?
Well, I think our culture has a kind of a mixed response to it. I had a painting exhibited maybe 8 years ago here in Austin in a bank building downtown, Crucifixion at Barton Creek Mall. And the president of the bank found the work to be sacrilegious and jerked it out of the exhibit, and the whole exhibit was shut down. So in that sense, they weren't very...
There wasn't a good response to your work there, huh?
But it's interesting. You talk about people's conceptions of religious art. I mean, people think in terms of what the Renaissance paintings. And now looking back, that we see these religious subjects in the context of, you know, the people wearing clothes, but they were wearing Renaissance clothes in those paintings. So the artist took that story and put it in a contemporary context. And I think that's what many Christian artists would be attempting to do today, but people don't understand that. Well, if it's in the contemporary context, they become offended by it.
Talking about story, John, that brings us to you. You're a writer. You've written books. There is a story, and people of a faith community, you are of the Christian faith community, but people of the faith community have a story. How does the story relate to the entire experience of this Creative Spirit Conference? What kind of story is the contemporary artist attempting to share?
Well, I think that we're all trying to share our stories with our struggles of trying to meet God and meet each other. You know, I know for myself, I write novels, and the things I write about are my struggles, and it comes out in context of stories as far as, you know, why isn't this relationship working? What are some of the things that block me, you know, in seeking God? And I think that, you know, each of our artists, each of the people that, you know, we struggle to create, that's a story in itself.
I was wondering about the response, and we want to talk about the response to the conference and what it has taken to put this conference together. That'll be held the first weekend, is that correct? The first weekend in April. Friday and Saturday. But another part of the artistic experience of our culture and of our day, and historically, is that of music. And music will play an important part in the Creative Spirit Conference. And pianist Ann Cogsdale will be presenting a recital of Brazilian circle dances called sardinas. These compositions were written by the Brazilian composer Villa Lobos and based on native children's songs. Ann Cogsdale uses the term communicating beauty in the title of the program. We invite you on Austin Faith Dialogue to listen to Ann Cogsdale with a short selection of that beauty. Thank you, Ann. Let's talk some more about what's going to happen at this conference, Creative Spirit Conference, to be held this first weekend in April. You're going to have what components? You're going to have the visual arts, you're going to have the written word, you're going to have music like Ann Cogsdale just shared with us. You're also going to have a guest speaker. Tell us a little bit about this individual.
Our guest speaker is Dr. Gene Edward Veith, who's the Dean of the Arts and Letters Department in Concordia, Wisconsin, Concordia University. And he's a widely published author. He's written several books. He's written a book called State of the Arts.
I have these books here, and I think, John, I'd like to maybe hold these up, and possibly we can show them on camera so that the individuals who are watching the program might be able to have the opportunity to see them. State of the Arts is the one that he's written, and the other is?
Reading Between the Lines, A Christian Guide to Literature.
And he is, Dr. Veith is, where does he teach?
At Concordia, Wisconsin.
And his work in this area is in what emphasis?
Well, I think that he's really appropriate for what we want to do because he has a wide grasp of the arts, a historic grasp, and also he has a good grasp of some of the contemporary issues of the arts in the Christian community. And this conference is really aimed at the church and the Christian artists and writers in our community. So we want to reach out to them, and I think that he'll have a lot to say and to those people.
Artists, writers, and musicians are all invited to come to this.
Right.
Now, why are the arts important? Why does the religious community, the church community, and Jim, you might be able to respond to this, why are they important to us historically, and why are they important today?
Well, I feel that the arts, generally speaking, all the arts, are able to inform us as human beings about who and what we are, you know, how we're related to the cosmos and how we're related to God. They speak to these kind of issues in our life, and I think art has always kind of served the religious, the mystical part of life. And I feel like we have a deep need for that in our culture today, that a lot of the kind of more spiritual aspects of our life have sort of been devalued. And I think we're trying to recapture some of that importance of art in the culture.
Are you trying through this conference to entitle Creative Spirit to hold up before the church community the possibility of being enriched more by the creativity that is really within the religious community? How can you go about challenging the religious community to do that? How do you go about getting people involved, and what is your means of inviting people to come to this conference?
Well, part of the schedule in the conference, we want to have a panel discussion with various pastors, priests, people from the religious community to talk about some of these issues, about how art intersects with the church, or sort of dovetails in the church. So these are some pressing issues, I think, that are valid for both the artists in the community and the faith community.
Do you think, John, there's a superficiality about our day and our time, and it's very important, do you think, for the religious community to speak to that issue?
Oh, yeah. I think that when people, well, you see it like a symptom as far as like people watch television, for example, or go to the movies and complain, like this is offensive morally, or this is bad, this is mediocre. And the reason that we don't have an influence is that we've just lost ground, we've dropped out, that Christians have dropped out of these fields, like in television and writing and things like that. So there's no voice, or there's very little voice and very little impact.
Then what you're saying is you want to give expression to those who would have a voice, artistically, writing, music, a voice to speak to the community, the faith community, and the community at large, about values and about a way to see life. What do you think we can do to make that impact? What could the church community do to say to our artists, to our creative people, we want you here, we want you involved? How could we encourage you? John, how could we encourage you, Jim?
Well, I think that the artists in our community are a great resource for the churches in this area, to have musicians, artists, to integrate their work into the life of the church in whatever way that can be. I think basically my view of art is that it's very sacramental. It's very incarnational. You know, it takes the things that are hard to speak of and makes them concrete, where we can begin to talk about them and wrestle with them. And
when you use the word incarnational, you're using that word to mean in the flesh, in
that's
life.
right. Yeah,
is that correct?
Yeah, you take the unseen and you make it seen, you know. And I think that's what art is good at.
Do you think, John, that our world, our time revolves upon seeing as believing, that type of idea, rather than saying that there is that which is beyond us, and that as artists we want to express that kind of mystical in our lives? Do you agree with Jim on that? Yeah,
I do. I think that there's some things that you can't hardly express except in artistic terms, you know, as far as your relationship with the Lord. I mean, that's so personal, and that's so individual. At the same time, there's such commonality in a corporate sense that I don't think that you can, I don't know, express the depth of it, or I don't know how to even express it right here. But, you know, it's hard to express just in giving information. Like, you know, well, tell me this, you know, point A, B, C, D, and let's go home kind of thing.
A manual type of thing.
Right, you know.
Yeah.
That's right. So it's more than that. It comes from the if you will, the soul, the being, the
That's
inside
right.
of people. Would you say then, Jim, as an artist, would you say that that type of creative spirit is in every human being? Those watching Austin Faith Dialogue today, do you think you might be able to say to them, you have a creativity about you, come use it?
I think so. You know, I think it's a potential in every person, and I think some people are obviously more talented, more gifted than others, but I think it's something that everyone possesses. It's a God-given part of being a human.
In your group, it's called Austin Christian Fellowship?
Arts Fellowship.
Artist Fellowship.
Arts Fellowship.
Arts Fellowship. Do you have people from a variety of traditions then within this organization? Are some of you very liturgical and some of you non-liturgical type? Do you have a cross-section of people?
Right.
What are some of the traditions you have? Roman Catholic?
I'm from the Episcopal Church, and we're very liturgically, you know, oriented.
Okay, Roman Catholic.
I don't know if we have
Episcopalian?
Roman Catholic yet,
Uh-huh.
but I want to expand. That's one of the things I want this show to accomplish is my hope anyway, is that we can reach out to the Christian community and find out who's there. Like there's a lot of things going on all the time that it's hard to find out, you know, to cross church lines, you know, to find out about those things or to find out about individuals who are working in different areas. And I would hope that, you know, our group can be sort of a clearinghouse eventually, or a communication tool, so that we can find out who's out there, who's doing what, and participate, and then go see and go by, you know, and support.
If a person watching this program would be interested in becoming a part of this fellowship, where do they go? If they can't contact their local pastor, who maybe doesn't know about this, where do they go?
Well, right now, the best thing we can do is call a number, which is Tim and Cindy High's number. Tim is a professor at the University of Texas in the art department, and their number is 451-1923, and we can send you information.
And if they would contact that number and those individuals, Tim and Cindy High, then they would be able to know also not only about your fellowship, but also begin to find out about the Creative Spirit Conference. Is that correct?
Right.
What are the goals that you have for the conference then? We've talked a little bit about the condition of our culture and our time. What are your goals for the conference? What do you want to do with that as you bring together clergy, you mentioned, but you also want to bring together laity to the campus of Concordia Lutheran College? What else do you want to do?
Well, I hope, again, that we can cross denominational lines. I hope that we can encourage artists. I want to educate the church. I want there to be an exchange of ideas. And I think and expose people to some of the art work of, like there's this art show, to expose people, and there's musical performance, to expose people to what some people are doing, you know, so that, you know, increase awareness. You know, to me, it's like small steps that we're trying to accomplish in this show. And I want to encourage, too, one of the lecture on Saturday afternoon is the challenge to create. And I really want that as a stepping stone to encourage people to use their creative gifts, whether it's on a professional level, whether it, you know, whatever level it is, you know, so that they can explore for themselves and find out what God's placed inside them.
I think that's an important idea, Jim, that John just, God's place within them. We were talking about that whole sense of God, that sense of sacred. How do you, we categorize people. We put people into boxes, and we put artwork into boxes.
Right.
When we talk about art, can we really talk about, or music, can we talk about religious as opposed to other kinds of art? Maybe this conference could lift the whole idea that life is sacred. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, like I said earlier, most of us are working out of who we are as individuals. And a large, or probably the most significant part of most of our lives is that we have a relationship with the living God. I mean, that's an amazing thing. You stop and think about it. And so that informs the whole rest of our life. And so we're constantly battling against the tendency in our nature and our culture to make this separation between the sacred and the secular. And our goal, I think, my goal as a human being as well as an artist, is to try and envelop as much of life within the sacred as possible, and to do away with those divisions. So much of my work, you know, like I said, it's not overtly Christian. I do, you know, cityscapes, I do still lifes, I do all sorts of paintings, and but to me they're consistent within who I am as an individual. And I think most of the artists in this exhibit, you'll be surprised when you see some of them will be very clearly Christian themes. Some of them won't be, but they're all within the context of the Christian faith and coming out of that viewpoint of the world.
You said there will be works of 15 artists displayed, is that correct?
That's correct, I think.
Will there then be discussion about these? Will the artists be there to discuss their work?
Many of the artists will be. There will be some local artists, and we're inviting artists from all around the state. We've got, I think, artists from San Antonio and from up in northeast Texas. So some of those will be there, and we hope to include some of them in the panel discussion and to be respondents, as well as to, there will be a discussion about the exhibit, but with the artists participating.
I mentioned to you that we have artwork in the particular congregation where I serve, Gethsemane Lutheran, and that artwork was done by a French man named Gabriel Loire. And he says that it's a window wall. It begins with the creation story and goes through the Old Testament and to the story of Jesus and then the church community. And he says that his artwork is alive. Do you, as artists, as writers, do you have that same sense that your work is alive as opposed to being dead?
Well, I hope so. I think probably what he means.
Yeah, we buried a few.
I would imagine what he means by that, or what I would mean by that when you say that my artwork is alive, is that I put on canvas some of my feelings, my impressions about life. And then you as a viewer come to that canvas and you bring your life experiences, your faith or whatever, and you interact with that painting. So it's not like I'm putting up there a series of propositions and you can come and say, yes, that's true or not true or whatever. But you have to interact with the painting, so the painting becomes a medium for me and you to interact.
You're invited then as a viewer to become a participant, to involve yourself in discourse with that work of art.
Exactly right.
With the objective of talking more about the meaning of life.
Yeah, I often use the analogy that that art is like a companion, and so that if you come up to a painting or you read a story or hear a piece of music, something in you is touched and begins to vibrate, almost like a chord. When you hit a chord and it makes another string next to it begin to vibrate because it's on the same frequency. Mm-hmm. And that vibration begins to take place and you respond. And all of a sudden, you don't feel so alone in the universe anymore. You feel like there's someone out there who I'm connecting with. And so it dispels, I think, the despair so many of us feel, the loneliness. And I think that's a big role that art plays. It's like a companion.
A major theme of today, despair and loneliness. And maybe because people aren't vibrating. Maybe not responding. Is
That's
that
right? Yeah.
And you feel that way as an artist, visual art. John, you also writing with books?
Yeah, I think it's very similar. You know, I pray constantly when I write. And I hope that, that I'm walking in the Holy Spirit when I write, and I hope it's inspiring in the same sort of sense of when you get involved in a story that's good, that you hope that God's touched, then it touches people. Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised at the way it does touch people, because I'm not trying, I'm trying to get out what's inside of me. Was that struggling to get it out, in the best way that's possible. But when it, you can't control how it touches people, because I've had a lot of response, and I've had books out for several years, and it's surprising to see what does touch people, like this image or this bit or this piece or that, it really, it spoke to me, and but you can't control that. You don't know how. I mean, just kind of send it out like a letter, and then you see what it is.
John, what I hear from you and Jim, both of you, is that you have an offering to give. And you have an offering to give to the Austin community and inviting them to come to the Creative Spirit Conference. And we want to invite everyone to come and participate in that who is interested in the arts, maybe in the faith community, in the church.
Right.
Jim, thank you. John, thank you for joining us today on Austin Faith Dialogue and to discuss the conference. And we'd like to remind all of you that you're invited to come next weekend to Concordia Lutheran College, April 3rd and 4th. And if you want more information about religious art program, we invite you to call, and that number again is
451-1923.
As we leave you, Ann Cogdale is going to share one more piano selection. Thank you once again for joining us on Austin Faith Dialogue, and join us again next week. Until then, peace be with you.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.